They say the village of Alioa was erased not by time, but by its own reflection. Long ago, travelers spoke of a place where no echo returned, and where shadows followed a heartbeat too late. In the heart of that silence, behind the thick arms of a dying forest, stood a single hut, its walls half-eaten by termites, its roof drooping like an old widow's back. And inside that hut, resting against the farthest wall, was a mirror that remembered everything. It was not made of glass, nor polished metal. Its surface shimmered like still water, deep, black, and whispering. They said it could show not just your face, but what your soul once was, and what it will become. But those who gazed too long never left with the same eyes again. No one entered Alioa anymore. No one dared. Not since the last villager was swallowed by his own reflection, screaming words no living tongue could translate. The jungle took the rest, the huts, the drums, the laughter, all gone. Only the mirror remained, untouched by decay, feeding on memories of those foolish enough to look. Years later, when the stories became old warnings told by firelight, a man named Ikenna arrived at the edge of that forbidden land, a historian chasing the ghost of forgotten tribes. He thought himself fearless, but some doors of memory were locked for a reason. That night, when the wind bent low and the trees whispered his name, Ikenna would learn the truth. Skull, the past never dies. It only waits for someone to look back. The journey began with dust. It rose from the earth in spirals around Ikenna's boots, clinging to his trousers, gathering on his lashes like the faint memory of another life. The sun above him was heavy and coppery, sagging in a sky so pale it looked bleached. All around stretched the savannah's slow decay, the grass brittle, the air humming faintly with flies, the silence sharp enough to cut through thought. Ikenna had been walking since dawn. He carried a weathered satchel stuffed with notebooks, a small hand recorder, a foldable camera, and a single book bound in dark leather. His late father's field journal. His father had been an anthropologist too, obsessed with African oral traditions, old spirits, and vanished places. He had died suddenly, his last notes cryptic. Alioa, the place where memory feeds. Ikenna never found more. No maps, no coordinates, just that word Alioa. He'd spent years chasing rumors, combing through libraries and old market gossip, until a trader in Obudu whispered the forbidden name with shaking hands. Now, with sweat stinging his eyes and exhaustion clawing at his back, he was close. Too close. He reached a crooked wooden sign nailed to a tree. The letters were almost erased by moss, but he could still read them. Alioa, 3 miles. Below it, someone had carved a warning in red charcoal. Do not let your shadow cross its gate. He laughed under his breath, muttering, Folklore and fear, always the same. A rustle behind him made him glance back. Only the tall grass swayed, whispering secrets to the wind. Still, the feeling lingered, the odd sense that something was walking a few steps behind him, barefoot, breathing lightly. By the time he reached the forest's edge, the air had changed. It was colder, wetter, carrying a faint metallic tang, like rust or blood. The trees grew so tightly that their branches tangled like ribs in a cage. A single narrow path led inside, carpeted with leaves that muffled sound. He hesitated. The stories he'd heard replayed in his head, stories told by trembling old tongues. The village isn't gone. It's sleeping in the mirror's belly. If you hear your name in the wind, don't answer. The mirror shows you the part of yourself that time forgot. He touched the pendant around his neck, his mother's cross, and stepped into the forest. Instantly, the sounds of the outside world vanished. No wind, no birds. Even his own breathing seemed to fade. Only the faint crunch of his boots. The deeper he walked, the darker it became, though the canopy was thin. The trees leaned inward, their bark blackened and slick. Once he swore he saw a face in the bark, wide eyes, open mouth, frozen mid-scream. But when he blinked, it was gone. Hours passed. Or minutes. Time stretched strange inside that place. When he finally stumbled into a clearing, the sight stole his breath. There it was, Alioa. The village lay drowned in silence, half swallowed by vines and roots. Roofs had caved in. Wooden beams jutted out like bones. Pots, tools, sandals, all left as if people had simply vanished mid-step. And in the center stood a withered baobab, its trunk split wide, as though lightning had struck long ago. Around its base were dozens of cracked mirrors, fragments reflecting sky, soil, and Ikenna's anxious face in strange distortions. He crouched beside one and brushed off dirt. Its surface shimmered faintly, though there was no light. He felt an electric tingle crawl through his fingers. "Mirrors everywhere," he murmured into his recorder. "It's as if the villagers worshipped reflection itself." He took several photos, scribbled notes, and circled the area. That's when he noticed a single hut near the far end of the village, larger than the rest, its doorway covered by hanging reeds. Something about it drew him in like gravity. As he approached, he noticed carvings etched into the doorframe. Spirals, eyes, crescent moons, and what looked like faces splitting open. The wood was warm to the touch, almost pulsing faintly beneath his palm. Inside, dust floated like gold in the lantern light. Animal bones hung from the ceiling, rattling softly as he entered. A clay pot stood overturned, and near the far wall, half covered in cobwebs, leaned the mirror. Unlike the others outside, this one was whole. Perfect. He exhaled slowly. "Found it," he whispered, setting down his pack. The mirror was taller than a man, framed in a dark wood that shimmered as if oiled. Its surface was black but deep, not opaque, more like standing water in a cave. It reflected light strangely, bending it. When Ikenna raised his lantern closer, his own reflection appeared, faint, delayed by a heartbeat. His breath caught. He waved his hand. The reflection followed, but half a second late. He chuckled nervously. Interesting phenomenon. Delayed reflection, possibly optical density of surface. He stopped recording mid-sentence. Because the reflection's eyes moved before his did. He blinked. The image corrected itself, now perfectly still. "Probably exhaustion," he muttered. He sat on the floor, flipping open his father's journal. The last entry read, "The mirror remembers what the world forgets. I saw them again. They are waiting." Beneath the words was a smudged drawing, a circle of people kneeling before the mirror, their faces melting into its surface. Ikenna shivered. He looked around the hut. The faint smell of something burnt hung in the air. A low, rhythmic sound, drip, 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 came from somewhere inside the walls. He found a crack, peered through it, but saw nothing. Only darkness. His rational mind screamed to leave, but something else, a pull, quiet and irresistible, rooted him there. He set up his camera, focused it on the mirror, and began documenting. Test 1. Reflection response in low-light conditions. For an hour nothing happened. The mirror simply stood there, still and deep. Ikenna began to relax, even feeling foolish for being nervous. But when he reviewed his footage, his stomach dropped. He rewound the video, leaned close to the small screen. The woman's face was partially visible, calm, distant, almost sad. But her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting no light. He turned slowly toward the mirror. Nothing. Just his own reflection. He laughed shakily, closing the camera. Trick of exposure. Light artifact. That's all. Still, when he blew out the lantern and laid down his mat, he could not shake the thought that someone else was breathing in the room. That night, as the wind shifted, the reeds at the doorway moved though no air passed through. And deep in the mirror's black surface, a faint shimmer stirred, like ripples on dark water waiting. When Ikenna woke, the lantern had gone out, and a pale, cold light filtered into the hut. Not dawn's warmth, but something dull and bluish, like the reflection of a moon beneath water. He sat up slowly. The air was thick, unmoving. His skin prickled with dampness, and for a brief moment, he couldn't tell whether he was awake or still trapped in a dream. His camera's small red light blinked weakly. It was still recording. He crawled to it, squinting at the screen. The timestamp told him he had been asleep for barely 2 hours, but on the video he never moved. His body lay completely still, yet shadows flickered and shifted across the walls as if people were walking by. He looked up. The mirror stood quiet in its corner, a tall, dark slab. But the moment he met his reflection, something was off again. It was standing slightly closer than he was. He frowned. That's impossible. He reached toward the surface. It felt cooler than stone, smooth but somehow breathing. The faintest fog formed beneath his fingertips, not on the glass but inside it. A pulse, a tremor, a whisper. Then a voice. A female. Whispering in a dialect older than his own tongue. You came back. Ikenna froze. His hand dropped, his heart slamming against his ribs. Who's there? No response. Only silence thick enough to taste. He grabbed his flashlight and shone it across the room. Nothing. The doorway reeds shifted slightly, as though something had brushed past them. He stepped outside. The entire village was blanketed in an eerie twilight, though the sky above glowed faintly gray. Not morning, not night. The Baobab's branches creaked. Around it, the broken mirrors shimmered faintly as though catching a light that wasn't there. He raised his camera and began filming. Day 2. The environmental light remains abnormal. Ambient luminescence without a visible source. Possible phosphorescent reflection from mineral. He stopped mid-sentence. On the far side of the clearing stood a woman, the same one from the recording, barefoot. White garment fluttering softly in the wind that didn't exist. Her face was turned slightly downward, hair falling over her eyes. Her hands hung at her sides, fingers unnaturally long. Ikenna's throat tightened. Hello. She didn't move. Didn't blink. He took one step forward. She raised her head. Her eyes were blank, 2 mirrors reflecting only his terrified face. He stumbled back, tripped, dropped his camera. When he looked up again, she was gone. The clearing was empty, save for the trembling of the reeds and the faint hiss of air through the trees. He ran until his lungs burned, until the forest swallowed him whole. But no matter how far he went, the path curved back toward the village. He would emerge through the same clearing again and again, each time more frantic, until he realized he could not leave. Panting, he sank beside the baobab, wiping sweat from his neck. That's when he saw it, faint writing carved into the tree's inner bark. Old script. His father's handwriting. We were wrong. It remembers too much. Don't let it know your name. If you see her, don't speak. Ikenna's stomach turned cold. He clutched the pendant on his neck. Father, he whispered. What did you find here? That night, he sat inside the hut again, trying to convince himself it was all fatigue and superstition. He adjusted his recorder and spoke quietly. The locals say Alioa was abandoned after a drought. But the carvings, the rituals, they were obsessed with reflection, the idea that memory is a living thing, that forgetting is death. He looked toward the mirror again. Its surface shimmered faintly now, the darkness inside churning like smoke. Maybe that's what this is, he muttered. A remnant of their belief system. An artifact representing. The whisper came again, closer this time. Ikenna. He froze. No one alive here should know his name. He turned the recorder toward the mirror. His reflection stared back. Same face, same eyes. But the mouth moved out of sync, whispering his name again, slower, like tasting the word for the first time. Ikenna. He backed away. The reflection followed, but one heartbeat late. Each movement lagged, stretched, wrong. The air grew colder. His breath misted. The mirror began to hum, low and metallic, like wind trapped inside stone. Then, from deep within the glass, a hand pressed outward, pale, slender, its fingertips fogging the surface. Ikenna screamed, stumbling backward. The mirror rippled, and a crack ran down its center with a sound like a sigh. And then silence. Trembling, staring at the split mirror, at the faint outline of a face just beyond the crack. A woman's, half-formed, half-trapped. She looked familiar. Over the next hours, Ikenna's fear twisted into obsession. He studied the carvings on the mirror's frame, tracing symbols with trembling fingers. They weren't decorative. They were names, written in an ancient dialect, repeating over and over. Kosi Nwaka, Adiz Ikenna. His heart lurched. His own name was there. He stumbled out into the open, shouting to the trees, to the vanished sky. "Who's doing this? What do you want from me?" The wind answered with a voice, dozens layered into one, whispering from every direction. "To remember." He turned wildly, spinning in circles. Faces flickered in the broken mirrors around the Baobab. Children, elders, men, women, all with hollow eyes and faint smiles. The woman in white appeared again, closer this time. She tilted her head. "You came to take what should not be seen," she murmured, her voice like water sliding over stones. "Now the mirror must take you back." Ikenna backed away, shaking. "No, I didn't come to steal anything. I'm only curious," she finished for him. "Like the others." The cracked mirror inside the hut began to tremble, its surface rippling violently. The ground beneath him vibrated. Leaves lifted as though caught in invisible wind. The baobab's trunk groaned, splitting further down the middle. One by one, the shards of broken mirrors around him began to rise, floating into the air, circling him like pieces of a shattered sky. Each one reflected a different version of him. Laughing, crying, screaming, staring blankly. And in each reflection, behind him stood the woman in white. He ran into the hut, slamming the door. His lantern flared weakly. He grabbed the camera. Its screen flickered, showing him something horrifying. In the reflection behind him, the woman was already inside the room. He spun around. Nothing. He turned back to the camera. Now she was closer. Her face pressed to his reflection's shoulder, smiling faintly. He hurled the camera at the wall. Shattered. The mirror laughed. Soft, musical, and utterly wrong. "The mirror does not lie," it whispered. "It only remembers." Hours later, or what felt like hours, Ikenna sat motionless, muttering to himself. His notes lay scattered, the pages curling in the cold air. He whispered, "It's all in the reflection. That's how they vanished. They were taken into memory itself." A realization, slow and dreadful, crept into his mind. His father had found this place, had written those last words. He hadn't died. He'd been taken. He stood shakily and faced the mirror again. The crack now pulsed faintly, as though alive. Within the glass, countless faces pressed outward, mouths opening and closing in silent screams. He raised the pendant again. "You won't have me," he whispered. "You won't have anyone else." The faces stilled. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then the mirror began to whisper his name again. Softly at first, then louder, until the entire hut echoed with it, until the glass shook violently. "Ikenna! Ikenna! Ikenna!" The door burst open. Wind roared in, scattering ashes, snapping his lantern flame dead. And in that complete darkness, the final whisper came, calm and close. "We already do." The storm began without warning. Wind screamed through the abandoned huts, tearing palm leaves from their roofs and scattering ash into the air. The baobab's branches thrashed like the arms of something alive. And in the center of that chaos Ikenna stood, soaked in cold sweat, clutching his father's pendant, facing the mirror that had already begun to glow from within. Its light wasn't white or gold or any color known to man. It pulsed between shades of blue and shadow, like moonlight trying to remember itself. He whispered, "Show me what you are." The mirror responded. The glass rippled outward, and for the first time, he saw what lay behind it. Not a reflection, not an image, but an entire world. A barren village trapped in twilight, its huts still standing, its people walking silently through the mist. But none of them cast shadows. None of them breathed. They were the villagers of Alioa. He fell to his knees, trembling. "It's real. You're all still here." The woman in white appeared behind him again, or perhaps she had never left. Her voice carried above the storm. "We never left, Ikenna. We were remembered too long. When the drought came, our bodies died, but the mirror kept our memories alive. We became what was left behind. He turned to face her. And my father, was he one of you? Her head tilted slightly, almost pityingly. He came searching for truth. He offered his reflection to the mirror, thinking he could control it. But once you give your image, you belong to it. No, his voice broke. You're lying. Look for yourself, she whispered. The glass shimmered again. Slowly, a figure emerged from within the swirling shadows. A man, tall, thin, with a pendant just like Ikenna's. His eyes were hollow, his face drawn but familiar. Father! The figure raised a trembling hand, pressing it against the glass from the inside. His lips moved silently. Ikenna stumbled forward until his palms met the mirror's cold surface. He could almost feel the warmth of the man's touch beneath the ice-cold barrier. Father, I can help you. I can. The man's voice came through like wind through broken reeds. You cannot help what no longer lives. The mirror began to hum again, louder now. Deep, guttural, shaking the ground beneath them. Its edges cracked, spilling veins of light. The woman in white backed away, her form flickering like smoke. He's calling you, she said. It wants to remember through you. Ikenna shook his head violently. No, I'm not like you. I'm not. But his reflection smiled. Not a nervous human smile. A wide, unnatural grin that stretched too far, showing too many teeth. It raised its hand and pressed against the glass. Ikenna's own hand, against his will, mirrored it. Two palms met. The surface of the mirror was no longer cold. It was liquid. Pulled. His hand sank in up to the wrist. He screamed, struggling to pull free, but the reflection's fingers closed around his own like chains. The voice of the mirror filled the air. Thousands of whispers at once, overlapping, pleading, commanding. Stay, stay, stay. He grabbed the frame with his free hand, clawing for leverage, but it was no use. His arm was being devoured inch by inch. The glass was swallowing him. Then, amidst the chaos, a familiar voice cut through the storm. Let go, my son. His father's voice. Through the shifting glass, he saw him again. His father's hollow eyes filled with something like regret. Don't fight it. End it. End the remembering. The pendant on Ikenna's neck began to glow, reacting to the mirror's pull. It throbbed with heat, searing his skin, but he understood. It was a key, a link between the living and the remembered. He yanked the pendant off and pressed it against the glass. The moment it touched, the entire hut exploded with light. The mirror screamed. The faces inside it, thousands of them, began to twist and shatter. The woman in white shrieked as her form dissolved into smoke. The ground split, and wind howled through the fractures like voices being dragged back into the earth. Ikenna fell backward as the mirror burst into 100 shards, each flying outward, embedding into the walls, into the ground, into the trees. Each shard carried a trapped reflection, a frozen scream, an echo of a forgotten soul. The pendant cracked in his palm, releasing a faint, dying glow. The storm began to die. He sat there, dazed, his body trembling. The air was still again. The mirror was gone, or so he thought. Because when he looked down, one shard had landed beside his knee. And in it, faintly, he saw his own reflection. Smiled at him. His heart stopped. No. He backed away, but every direction he turned, he saw more, shards scattered everywhere, each one reflecting his face, but smiling differently. Some calm, some mocking, some whispering his name silently with curling lips. Then the whisper began again. Not from the shards, not from the air, from inside him. You looked too long. Now you are remembered. The world flickered. The clearing vanished. The hut was gone. He stood in the same twilight world he had seen inside the mirror. The villagers of Alioa walking in silence around him, their faces pale, their eyes mirrors of their own. His father stood among them, wordless, motionless. He turned and saw the mirror standing once again, whole and unbroken, waiting. And on its surface, his reflection smiled. Now you will never be forgotten. He ran to the mirror, pounding it with his fists, screaming, Let me out! Let me out! But his voice was soundless, trapped in glass. Outside in the real world, the storm finally cleared. The forest returned to silence. The villagers from neighboring lands who came days later would find only Ikenna's camera lying in the dust, still recording, facing a blank, unbroken mirror propped against the Baobab. And in the faint light of dawn, that mirror shimmered, revealing a man's face staring back, pounding silently from the other side. The next morning, the forest was quiet. No storm. No wind. No trace of the chaos that had torn through the night. The clearing stood still, the ground cold and wet, the mirror leaning against the baobab tree exactly where it had been. But the village beyond it, the forgotten village, was gone again, like it had never existed. A group of travelers from the nearby region of Onitsha stumbled upon the scene while searching for lost livestock. They found burnt earth, scattered feathers, and one strange thing, a camera still running. The red light blinked steadily. They played the footage. Through the static, they saw flashes. A man's voice whispering questions, a woman in white behind him, and then darkness, followed by the distorted image of a face pressed against glass. Then silence. No one could explain it. The travelers brought the footage to the village elders. The elders didn't say a word. They only looked at the mirror in the background and ordered it to be buried deep in the ground, far from where any eyes could find it again. But mirrors don't forget. Ikenna stood in endless dusk. The sky never changed color. The sun never rose or set. Around him, the villagers of Alioa moved like shadows, whispering half-words, fragments of lives they once lived. He tried to speak to them, but they only looked at him with faces that weren't quite faces, eyes that reflected him back instead of seeing him. He walked for what felt like hours or years. Time didn't matter anymore. At last, he came to a well at the center of the ghostly village. The water inside shimmered faintly, reflecting not the sky, but the living world above. He saw people walking, working, laughing, people who had forgotten this place entirely. He whispered, "They don't even remember us." A voice answered from behind him, soft, sorrowful, the same woman in white. "That is the curse, Ikenna. The mirror was never meant to show beauty or vanity. It was a gift of memory, a doorway between what was and what will be forgotten. But when the living used it for pride, for greed, it trapped them in what they cherished most, their reflection." She knelt beside him, her face calm now, no longer ghostly. "Your father came here seeking truth. You came here seeking him. Both of you found what you truly were, reflections of the past, not the present." He clenched his fists. "Then why me? Why did it choose me?" "Because you remembered us," she said. "Because you cared when no one else did." She smiled faintly, a sad, almost human smile. "But caring has a price. You cannot bring back what is meant to fade." A faint light pulsed from within the mirror world, and for a moment, he saw his father standing beside her. His eyes, no longer hollow, looked peaceful. "You did what I couldn't, son. You ended the remembering." Ikenna stepped forward, tears burning his eyes. "Can I ever go back?" His father looked at him and for the first time smiled. "Only as a story." Then, as the light grew, the woman in white lifted her hand. "It's time," she said softly. "You will become what we are. The forgotten ones who remember too much." The light enveloped him. And somewhere, far above, in the living world, the buried mirror glowed faintly beneath the soil. Decades passed. The story of the mirror became a whispered legend, told around fires, shared between traders, travelers, and dreamers who dared wander too far into the forest. They said if you find the baobab tree at dusk, and the earth feels warm beneath your feet, you can sometimes hear a voice calling faintly from underground. A man's voice, asking if you still remember him. Some say the mirror's shards still exist, hidden in rivers, in windows, even in the eyes of those who look too long into their own reflection. But no one knows for sure. What they do know is this: the village of Alioa still appears on no map. Its name has been erased from every record. And yet, some people still dream of it. They see a dusty road, an empty well, and a mirror glowing faintly against the baobab tree, waiting for someone new to remember. Balance scale moral of the story. Some memories are graves we keep reopening. Some truths were buried for a reason. Curiosity may lead you to knowledge, but if you stare too long into the past might start staring back. In the end, Ikenna learned that remembrance without letting go is its own kind of curse. Sometimes what we think of as forgotten is only waiting. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more dark African folktales that echo through time. And remember, some reflections are better left unseen.